Before I get into the bulk of my criticism, let's start off with the comments he made in a couple of podcasts.
I've reviewed the tapes that appeared a few days ago in the proper context, and I don't believe that they say what is being reported. Nonetheless, I do say some things on the tapes that I do not mean, and which do not reflect my views. I regret the things that I said. I don't think I've been as sorry about anything my whole life.
I'm not going to say a lot about those comments as it's already been beaten to death, and Milo did own up to his mistake. With that out of the way, let's get started.
My name's Milo Yiannopoulos. I'm the founder and editor-in-chief of The Kernel, which is a new tech, media and politics magazine. We cover a lot of the businesses in East London.
Most people knew Milo worked for The Kernel, but he was a journalist well before that.
So how did you get involved in tech journalism?
I got my first big break with The Telegraph, and then when I had sufficient profile to do my own thing,
This next part is what I want you to focus on.
I now have much more freedom to write in the way that I like about the things that interest me. So effectively, I'm trying to create the magazine I always wanted to write for, but I couldn't find.
Milo is someone who wants to do things the way he wants, so that is part of why he started The Kernel, for more freedom. If I had to pick one word to describe some of the things he does, including the controversial comments that led to his departure from Breitbart, it would be irresponsible. Remember what I said earlier about how Milo wanted to do things the way he wanted to do them?
I got fired a number of times from a national newspaper. Most of it wasn't my fault, but it quickly dawned on me that I probably wasn't massively employable, like a lot of people who start their own businesses. And I thought, well, let's give it one more shot. I'll try and find a magazine that I might like to write for.
Milo already had a history of employment issues in journalism years before he joined Breitbart. Part of the reason he started The Kernel was an avenue to do what he wanted. The Kernel sued by former contributors for non-payment. After a series of deadlines for payment to the contributors had elapsed, Yiannopoulos, 27, promised on Monday those owed money that they would be paid by Wednesday. However, at the time of publication of this article on Wednesday, those owed money had not been paid. A university friend of Milo's didn't like the way he'd pick virtual fights with people. From what I gather in this article, Milo has a history of irresponsible behavior chaining from one venture to the next. Does Milo have any business sense, though? How about with sponsors? Apparently Milo had an Ask FM at one point back during his days at The Kernel. Why are there next to no adverts on The Kernel's website? Readers hate them. Next to no advertisements and issues with unpaid interns. Perhaps there's a connection? It's probably not a wise move if you invest your own money into the business.
3 initial investors, one of which was me, put most of my savings into the business. We're currently raising at the moment, which is a long process, particularly for us.
Milo is the sort of person that views his opinion as being above advertisers. He doesn't care if advertisers pull ads from websites he works for.
Started with Gamergate and now with Kellogg's, who withdrew their ads from Breitbart because they said that we don't reflect their values. 45 million readers and American voters don't reflect their values. Well, if you say so, go fuck yourselves.
If advertisers start pulling out of your website, at a certain point it doesn't matter how many readers you have. You can have the most read website on the internet, but if you aren't pulling in ad revenue to pay employees, eventually you lose them. It was also rumored that Breitbart employees threatened to walk out over Milo. Well, we all saw what his irresponsible behavior led to.
But I would be wrong to allow my poor choice of words to detract from my colleague's important job, which is why today I'm resigning from Breitbart effective immediately. This decision is mine alone. When your friends have done right by you, it's only right to do right by them. And for me, that means stepping aside so my colleagues at Breitbart can get back to the great work they do.
But that was his job working for someone else. Let's get back to an example of when Milo is in charge of something. I can't think of a better example than his privilege grant. It was first announced around January of 2016, but I believe it was around March when you could first make donations. He planned to have it ready that year, but it wasn't till about a year after he started it that he got it up and running.
My initiative to help white men further their education is now accepting applications. We've given it the brilliant name of the Yiannopoulos Privilege Grant. Now I've called it...
One of the concerning things is that this started as a joke.
This is an actual charity I set up. It started as a joke.
He started a grant as a joke, then decided to run with it. I heard different estimates as to how much he actually raised, so let's hear it from the man himself.
Hopefully we'll get it in time for this academic year.
Why?
We've raised, amazingly actually, from private donors and from me and from various other people, we've raised $250,000. So we're going to be
That's amazing.
We're going to be giving out
Congratulations.
100 scholarships of $2,500 to boys that really need the help.
100 scholarships at $2,500 apiece is $250,000. But his initial estimate isn't what he ended up going with.
Our pilot grant program, just to make sure that everything is working and operational, will begin with 10 students. We're going to give $2,500. It's not the biggest grant in the world, but it is by no means the smallest.
People helped him raise $250,000 for a joke that he ran with that he still needs to test out. Back in August of last year, around the time he was supposed to be giving out grants, there was no news. It had people asking, where's the money? Scrutiny began this week after Margaret McLennan, who was hired as a bursary's director, posted criticism on social media, saying it was mismanaged and she was no longer involved. She dropped out in late March, she said, because she was not paid and movement on the grant had hit a wall. Another unpaid person. Sort of reminiscent of the Colonel, which Milo was also partially in charge of. Margaret was not the only one raising questions. Earlier this week, Blair White, another YouTube personality who participated in the telethon, complained about uncertainty over the fund, tweeting that she felt duped. People need an explanation. Tons of money collected. Milo had a live stream last year to raise money for the charity, where many guests showed up to help out. Milo did eventually acknowledge the mistake and put things into motion.
And I do apologize for this very sincerely. This is entirely my fault. I have been, as many listeners will know, overtaken and overwhelmed, overburdened by my own success. And one of the things, of the various bits of the Milo empire that requires some love and attention, is the Yiannopoulos Privilege Grant.
Milo also has this way of putting blame on other people. That is to say, it's never entirely his fault.
This is what happens when I finally get competent people around me.
Now, although it took longer than I anticipated to set up the privilege grant, your government really does fucking suck.
Now, there were conspiracy theories running around as to what happened to the money, but given that Milo was in charge of it, Milo would be one of the only people who knows the truth. I did find it peculiar that around May of 2016, a month after the fundraiser, Milo mysteriously started posting picture after picture of himself flaunting large sums of money. This doesn't necessarily mean he was flashing money from the fundraiser, but it's rather stupid to show off how much cash you have after raising a large sum of money for a privilege grant you are responsible for. Milo had another book planned before Dangerous. That was his infamous Gamergate book. I'm currently assembling the book with the help of a research assistant and my marvelous literary agent, Toby Mundy, at the new TMA agency. We're well into the writing process and hope to have a completed manuscript by February. If you'd like to get in touch about the project, you can do so via email. If you go through some Reddit Ask Me Anythings that Milo participated in, he did a lot to talk up this book. Is there any information going to be in the book that has not been made public, a la Games Journal Pro level? There is a reason I have not written about Gamergate for a while at Breitbart. Have you faced any kind of pushback from your peers due to your wish to write this book or Gamergate in general? I'm not talking about the blogger crap, but like people you work with and respect approaching you, trying to get you to step away? Yes, of course. They don't understand why I'd write a book defending misogynists, to which I reply, the fact you think that's what Gamergate is about is precisely why I'm writing it, and why you should read it. They will. So when do you expect to have the book finished and released? Also, since Gamergate is and will be ongoing, where will you end your book, and will there be plans for a newer edition in the near future? Should be done by the end of February. After that, it will be in the publisher's hand. Anyone who knows Milo knows he has a way of talking things up. There's always a big announcement, big news coming. Everything he touches is built up to be some impressive thing that will blow people away. So what happened with his Gamergate book? When is your book coming out? As part of the deal, I've sold the Gamergate book to Breitbart, who will be publishing it early next year. I know it's been a long time coming, but now I have the resources to really knock it out of the park. It is going to be worth the wait. It's overflowing with citations and research and will, I hope, be a really powerful resource for anyone interested in the issues Gamergate touches on. And you might be surprised by some of the people I'm sympathetic to. I'm honestly not sure what came of that book. I looked around and couldn't find anything. Milo announced this book during the height of Gamergate, talked it up over and over, then passed it on to someone else. Now he can claim he's no longer responsible, even though he is the one who hyped it up. Milo has this way of changing his positions on topics. People can evolve their positions over time for various reasons, but Milo can do a 180 mysteriously when it would benefit him the most. By now, most people are familiar with Milo's article from 2012, "The internet is turning us all into sociopaths." Of course, Milo will tell you he doesn't disagree with that article at all.
Prominent journalist is responsible for what other people post on the internet.
Let me read to you what you wrote in 2012 at the Kernel.
Sure.
There's a longer piece.
Yes,
You wrote this, right?
No, of
Is
course.
this... What happened? You don't agree with this anymore?
No, I agree with it entirely.
I did find another article written by Milo. Facebook is destroying fragile subcultures. No one likes a troll, and given the choice, members of most online communities would rather commenters were held to account for their inane writings and even outright abuse. So plugins like Facebook comments, which tie your reactions to your real identity via Facebook, encourage a more grown-up approach to online debate and should be welcomed. Convenient that trolls are now part of the solution when Milo decided to start acting like one.
Are you a troll?
Of course.
What is trolling? How do you look at it?
I like to think of myself as a virtuous troll. You know, I'm doing God's work. Trolling is very important.
Why?
Trolling is absolutely essential. America needs more trolling because trolls are the only people who tell the truth these days.
He's also used to having different stances on certain topics.
And egotistical as well, I guess, Milo, because when you clock up your followers, you think, oh, all those people are interested in my life.
There is a temptation to get hooked on the number of followers you have. It's not a particularly meaningful measure of anything, though.
No, actually, plenty of people enjoy what I do. Over 380,000 of them, as you say, enjoy what I do.
Yeah, I think it's a bit peculiar how much attention people pay to Twitter.
Milo already has an answer, though. His positions evolved over time.
So there's a bit of irony in this. I'm thinking about this 2012 op-ed that you wrote that I'm sure you've heard about.
Yes, you all have the same research as you guys.
You wrote that.
I did. I think it's fair to say my feelings have evolved on that subject.
And how did they evolve?
Well, I think 4 years of being on Twitter and being on Facebook and watching how these companies operate, but also realizing that you know, the trolls often aren't the bad guys. Often the trolls are the only ones telling the truth.
I guess you could argue Milo didn't understand the importance of social media influence till he built a larger audience, giving him more reach over the internet. One of the more interesting things I found was a lecture Milo gave about internet addiction back in 2011.
I am here to talk about something a little bit different from what you've heard so far. I want to take a step back from that a little bit and talk about some of the things that are not so great about technology. Namely, are we getting addicted to it? And if we are, does it matter? Whether internet addiction is a serious problem. If it is a serious problem, do we need to do something about it? Well, the answer to that second question is going to be yes, it does matter. One of the things that we're creating is actually fueling some quite destructive and some quite damaging behaviors. Pornography is one of the fastest spreading addictions today. This is Gail Dines. Now, Gail Dines is a sociology professor, is America's best-known authority on the effect of porn on women. Something else we can talk about is loneliness. Are we being helped by having Twitter and Facebook and these endless feeds all around distracting our attention from the fact that we're alone? We live in this age of intolerable and endless cries for our attention.
Milo's persona many years ago was how much he cared about how harmful people were on the internet and how harmful it was to us. Now his mentality is, grow a thicker skin. They're just words on the internet. It's almost like two completely different people. But as was said earlier, people can evolve their positions over time. One thing I do bring into question are his stances on video games. Some of you may not know that in the past, Milo had pretty scathing things to say about video games and gamers. 12-year-old console gamers are being raped by dorky weirdos on Grand Theft Auto. Hackers mod the game so they can rape other players. It's a new low for the video game industry. Why doesn't its developer Rockstar Games seem to care? Milo called these gamers frustrated beta males, dorky deviants. Milo also had choice things to say about Rockstar Games. Of course, we all know that the effects these games have on people are grossly exaggerated, and Milo has come to this conclusion as well. Milo could almost debate himself on video games.
Far left feminists who say that every video game is problematic, that there is something wrong with all these video games.
He is playing out not a misogynistic fantasy, but a video game fantasy.
The same journalists who protected video games when the religious right in the 1980s and 90s said that video games turn kids into killers.
This is somebody who is no longer able to tell the difference between video games and the movies that maybe his father directed and real life.
Yeah.
The research is the most generous you could be is to say the research is, the jury's out.
If there was something that affected him the most in the culture around him, in my view, it was video games.
The reality is that actually these video games are quite good for people.
If there is an influence that helped to shape his violent fantasy, then I think it was video games.
I've always found it peculiar with Milo that he can change his position on anything and all he has to do is explain it. He didn't understand before. He learned something new. I'm sorry I said all those messed up things about video games and gamers. Milo can explain anything away. I will, however, challenge one claim that is not so easily explained. That is whether Milo himself is an actual gamer.
Lesbianic feminist kind of lunatic. That's the sort of person that's criticizing video games. And very often the people don't even play video games.
Milo has a problem with people criticizing video games who don't play them, yet Milo showed a peculiar interest in video games during a consumer revolt that put him on the map because, let's be honest, Milo was pretty irrelevant in the culture war before Gamergate. But how could Milo get on the good side of gamers? Feminist bullies tearing the video game industry apart. Grand Theft Auto isn't for the faint of heart, but the latest outrage seems confected and pointless. Milo also went on to write other pro-gamer articles and continued to say things to garner favor with gamers. I've been playing video games for nearly a year. Here's what I've learned. Following voluminous feedback from my readership after that first column I wrote on the controversy, I knew it was time to go native and become a gamer myself, or at least to dip my toe in the water. Previously, I had been rude about games, gamers, and gaming culture, painting them with the same broad strokes seen to this day across the liberal internet press and mainstream media. But I soon realized that my impressions of gaming culture were wildly off base as soon as I was embraced by the community, a community I have found to be perhaps the friendliest and most welcoming group of people on the internet. I talk a lot of shit, but I'm willing to change my mind if presented with an argument instead of pearl-clutching cries of misogynies. Gamers rose to the challenge and corrected me, and here I stand. With several thousand gamers watching my Twitch stream, I experienced my first game, Valve's smash hit Portal 2. It's a sort of puzzle game where you have to move blocks around and press buttons in the right order to progress through each of its increasingly complex levels. So Milo is a gamer now. Surely he must have acquired an interest in video games since he started giving them a chance. A Twitch stream, he says? Let's go check out his Twitch channel. In the About section, he was planning to answer questions on Saturday, September 26th. Last time we had a Saturday, September 26th was 2015. There's also a couple of links to articles he wrote back in 2014 during Gamergate. I'm not sure the last time he used this Twitch channel, especially since there's no archived videos. But I think it's safe to say he abandoned it. Kotaku hates Steam Curator, so I'm becoming one, obviously. This seems less like a legitimate interest and more like trolling. Also telling gamers something they might like to hear, because Milo is such an adamant gamer with an abandoned Twitch channel. Going back to these Ask Me Anythings that Milo participated in, surely he's acquired a wealth of knowledge and interest in video games by now. What video games have you been playing lately? Not many. Things have been hectic. Hopefully next month I can get back to CSGO and Postal. Truthfully, I haven't played in quite a while because I've been traveling non-stop for the past few months. Can you offhand name your specs for your PC? What model phone and tablet? There's also various other gaming-related questions. Milo's response to all this? I can see I still have much to learn. The thing I'm bringing into question is not whether Milo believes games are harmful, it's whether or not this persona of Milo being a gamer was just an act to garner the attention of other gamers. What better way to fit in than to pretend to be one? One of his most notorious targets was Anita Sarkeesian. Back in the early days of Gamergate, Anita was one of the biggest adversaries to the movement, so it was only natural Milo would pick her as a target for multiple articles. An open letter to Bloomberg on the delicate matter of Anita Sarkeesian. In a few short months, Milo went from being a harsh critic of video games to one of its champions. framing himself as someone who would take on the big bad Anita Sarkeesian. Sometime in 2015, he thought it would be humorous to compare Anita Sarkeesian to Jack Thompson. Who said it, Anita Sarkeesian or infamous game hater Jack Thompson? The point of Milo's humor was the language both of them used was so similar it could be difficult to distinguish between the two. However, I've also noticed similarities between Anita Sarkeesian and Milo Yiannopoulos. I've noticed some interesting parallels, so I'm going to play a little game called Anita, Milo, or Both. And then there is Sarkeesian herself. Coupled with thoroughgoing and ambitious demolitions of her theoretical framework and methods, critics have pointed to Sarkeesian's own history as an opportunist and vacuous self-promoter and, in the word of one prominent Gamergate supporter, multi-level marketing scammer, as reason to be skeptical of her sincerity. The following video, which shows Sarkeesian extolling the virtues of multi-level marketing, has garnered nearly 55,000 views on YouTube. Milo has a history with mismanaging money and losing jobs as a journalist, and mysteriously evolves his positions when it benefits him the most. Who has a suspicious history that we should be skeptical of? A. Anita Sarkeesian. B. Milo Yiannopoulos. C. Both. Then of course there is this peculiar claim, which you repeat uncritically in your coverage, that Sarkeesian has been a gamer since she was a small girl. Now, there can be no doubt that Miss Sarkeesian these days possesses a sizable library of titles and perhaps even a few games consoles, as you breathlessly recount, as though you were surprised by the fact that a professional critic of video games plays video games. I could say the same thing about Milo, who acquired gamer credentials only after he took an interest in defending gamers. But another widely shared YouTube video suggests that Sarkeesian only began to identify as a video game enthusiast when it promised her commercial advantage. Despite claiming in an op-ed from the New York Times that she had begged for a Game Boy for Christmas in the early 1990s, as recently as 2010 she was telling audiences that she was not a video gamer. Yet Milo was unfairly criticizing video games as recently as 2014. Which one was not a fan of video games before they became a fan of video games? A. Anita Sarkeesian. B. Milo Yiannopoulos. C. Both. Anita and Milo also have something else in common. They both stoke outrage, then highlight the worst of the backlash to frame themselves as necessary to fight the backlash they help to spark. Isn't it interesting how similar the two are when you actually sit back and think about it? Anyone who's known Milo for a while knows he likes to talk about himself. A lot.
We did at least get the old dear to read out some of our headlines.
Yeah, we did.
We did.
Milo's in particular.
Much more dramatically, I'd just like to say. I mean, they just disinvited you. I had riots. People got beaten up.
I'm now focused on the book, of course, which is rocketed to #1, the Amazon bestseller list.
Most of my employees did not go to college or dropped out of college. They are smarter, like I am smarter, than 90% of the people in this room. No offense.
He was also infatuated with the idea of being the White House press secretary.
In Cleveland.
Daddy Force One.
You call it Daddy Force One?
I do. When I'm press secretary, I want Debonair Force One.
Milo Yiannopoulos?
However, there are a couple things I found that bothered me about Milo and his self-centered nature. Going back to another Ask Me Anything in regards to his Gamergate book, is there anything specific you are going to exclude from the book? If so, why? Nothing is off limits, but I'm not going to reward people who have merely used Gamergate to draw attention to themselves with, well, attention. Milo built his career off of Gamergate. His entire persona as a fake gamer was just an act to appease his newfound audience. Everything Milo has going for him is in large part thanks to Gamergate, but he doesn't want to reward people who used Gamergate to draw attention to themselves. How much of Gamergate are you going to cover exactly? Just the quest for ethics, or are you going to include the internal e-celebrity drama as well, like the Skype cabal mess? The book will contain as little of the e-celeb and Skype nonsense as possible. It will focus on people who actually drove the story forward and had something insightful to contribute. Not attention whores, drama queens, and profit seekers, much as I love a good drama queen under other circumstances. So what exactly does Milo mean here? Which e-celebrities is he talking about? Attention whores? Like how Milo is the face of everything he gets involved with? How he goes on national television to talk about how he was banned from Twitter? Drama queens? Does anyone remember how many drama articles he wrote during Gamergate? You do realize Milo rarely mentions these people anymore. Profit seekers? Hey Milo, where's the money? Didn't you also brag on and on about your $250,000 book deal?
I'm now focused on the book, of course, which is rocketed to #1, the Amazon bestseller list.
Milo has a way of framing himself as a savior. He alludes that he's not in it for himself, even though the overwhelming evidence suggests otherwise, which leads me into my next section.
I think that I'm the self-important, irritatingly talented, kind of arrogant asshole it's okay to like.
I like to think of myself as a virtuous troll, you know, I'm doing God's work.
Milo likes to elude that he's necessary. The reason I say elude is I've also seen him say somewhere that he also claims himself as part of a bigger thing. Milo has a clever way of working in certain keywords or phrasing things a certain way so he can point at something he said somewhere else. So rather than try to catch him on something, I want to explain how Milo sets up situations that in turn he uses to justify what he's doing and how he does it. Remember the violent protests Milo had to deal with?
Speech tonight. Things outside are absolute pandemonium. There are now 2 helicopters. The protests have turned violent.
Milo went on to talk about the progressive left protesters.
The progressive left-wing protesters.
It's the face of his opposition.
This is, you know, the face of the progressive social justice left. I mean, they're doing everything they possibly can to shut down an event by a gay speaker with the wrong opinions because they're upset about Donald Trump.
Now, it does sound pretty horrific. How terrible. But there is a bit of clever wording on Milo's part.
It's absolutely... I have done a lot of these, and I've never... you know, UC Davis wasn't anything like this. This is the worst that it has ever been.
Notice how he said he's done a lot of these, but it's never been this bad. But previously he said that these current protests were the face of what he's up against.
This is, you know, the face of the progressive social justice left. This is the worst that it has ever been.
This goes back to what I said earlier. Milo stokes outrage, points at the worst possible example, and frames it as what he's up against. It's not to say there isn't a legitimate concern, it's just sort of like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Milo stokes outrage, then say this is why he's necessary.
My purpose is to lob bombs. My purpose is to be a fire starter, right? In an outrage culture, I think the appropriate response is to be outrageous. Because what I want to do is smash political correctness. I don't want everyone to be like me, but I think it's important that there are some people like me.
See what I mean? Milo is taking advantage of this situation for his self-interest. But let's just give Milo the benefit of the doubt. Let's say that he has a point and is justified in what he does. He also views himself as a uniter. He uses humor, so clearly that must mean he's trying to unite people. But he's also a troll.
You know, humour isn't how you drive people apart. You know, these sort of policing humour for racism and sexism is utterly wrong-headed. Not just because normally it isn't there, but because that's how we build bridges, not how we break them.
Really?
I hurt people for a reason.
But...
For sure. No, I like to think of myself as a virtuous troll.
Milo's act as a troll is actually divisive in nature. He makes a lot of friends, but he also makes a lot of enemies. But because he frames his humor as important, it puts him in a position where he's allowed to do or say things most people would normally avoid. Anyone remember when Milo was talking like he was going to take down Twitter? He also constantly talks about how successful he is and continues to build his brand. I think this clip pretty much summarizes Milo's act in a nutshell.
Feminists who sort of bait men into saying mean things on Twitter and then immediately turn around and play the victim, they create precisely the problem that they say they're there to fix. They're legitimizing their own position by being the bad actor in the first place.
Someone who legitimizes his own position by being the bad actor.
The best way to deal with people that you don't agree with, whether they are conservatives or progressives, is the full glare of the spotlight, because you should have the confidence in your own opinions, and you should have the fortitude and courage to believe that you can beat them in a fair, open marketplace of ideas.
There is some truth to that. In the open marketplace of ideas, the best ideas should come out on top. I did find a few clips from a few years back that I found interesting.
What's been a horrible betrayal of young people from underprivileged backgrounds has been, sorry to say, the left-wing press, which should stick up for these people, scaremongering about tuition fees. When you put a word up like that, like gay, you make it an attractive target. Because you've written in national newspapers these awful, naughty words. What's a kid going to do? Use it. Is that what I try to do is treat what I see as absurd opinions and absurd ideas with the level of satirical contempt that I think they deserve.
That is to say, he was trying to sell his ideas in the marketplace for years. I want to draw your attention to this one clip in particular.
And looking at the power bar, Milo, why do you think it is that you're slipping behind slightly?
I don't know.
What do you think?
I think it might be that thing about
insulting the whole of Scotland. Yeah. Yeah, that might have something to do with it. Okay.
The thing people like Milo always forget to mention is marketing and popularity play a part in the open marketplace. The way I see it is the better you are at selling your ideas, the more likely people are to buy into them. Watching Milo from a few years back, it really is like two different people. Milo became better at marketing himself, and in turn, his ideas resonate more with people. The other aspect? That of popularity. How many times have you witnessed people buy into something just because someone popular was advertising it? Hiring famous celebrities to sell products is common. It's standard practice in the movie industry to hire actors and actresses that bring people to the box office. Any system that has a flaw in it will have it exploited. Any system that can be abused will be abused. Because he's so good at marketing himself, and because he's popular, Milo has a certain advantage in the marketplace of ideas. Over the last year, Ben Shapiro has become a rival of sorts to Milo Yiannopoulos. I remember when they seemed like good friends. Somewhere during the election cycle, Milo jumped on the Trump train, but Ben had reservations. Over time, they ended up becoming critical of one another. Back in May of 2016, Milo challenged Ben Shapiro to a debate with Dave Rubin as a moderator. Now, this debate never happened, and Ben no longer has an interest. So let's hear both sides of the story. First, Milo.
This is a very weird situation that happened, right? I didn't reply to an email for 2 weeks because I'm busy and I was doing stuff like this. No word of, I'm not bullshitting it. I'm not bullshitting it. I think my inbox has about 30,000 unread emails at the moment. I didn't reply for 2 weeks, as I very often don't. And then I hear that Ben has published a video saying I'm a chicken and I won't debate him, which I never said. We hadn't fixed a date yet. I wonder whether it's because did he decide he didn't want to do it in the end or whatever, but the invitation is open. Bring it, Ben.
Milo claims he was busy. Now let's hear Ben's side.
So, the answer is no, I won't be debating Milo. The reason I won't be debating Milo is because he's a coward. And the reason he's a coward is because 3 weeks ago, first of all, somebody, I think it was Dave Rubin, plus Steven Crowder, they both offered to host a debate between me and Milo on the alt-right and Donald Trump. And Milo went totally silent. And then he blamed Breitbart News for telling him not to do it. A couple weeks later, he then said, fine, I'm willing to do it now. And he emailed me, and he emailed Dave Rubin, and he emailed all the people involved, and he said, let's set this up. And within an hour, I had my assistant email back times, right? And he said within the next couple of weeks. No response. Nothing. Right? He says, I'll get back to you. No response. For a week. For 2 weeks. For 3 weeks, right? And then I email him again, last week and a half ago, and I said, okay, well, I'm holding these dates open, and I'm not going to keep holding dates open, so are we doing this or not? No response.
Ben claims Milo was not cooperating. Since Dave Rubin was supposed to moderate, and he has chimed in, let's hear his opinion.
Yeah, all right, so let's just do the Milo thing quick. I don't want to dwell on it, but so many people ask. So for the record, with you sitting here right now, I will fully say what I've said many times on Twitter, which is that Milo had the original idea of doing it. He sent an email to our team, said, let's do this debate, me and Ben, Dave will moderate. You immediately responded, yes, you gave dates, and then Milo basically dipped out. That says the truth as much as I know it. If you know more,
that's exactly right.
Moment.
Dave and Ben were both cooperating and trying to set it up, but it was in fact Milo that wasn't responsive. So now we're going to deconstruct the problems with Milo in this case. First off, Milo, you were the one who challenged Ben. You said publicly on Facebook, I've challenged Ben. You were the one who was not cooperating. I was too busy to respond is not a reason, it is an excuse.
I didn't reply to an email for 2 weeks because I'm busy and I was doing stuff like this.
And within an hour, I had my assistant email back times, right? And he said within the next couple of weeks. No response.
I didn't reply to an email for 2 weeks because I'm busy and I was doing stuff like this.
Ben was on top of things at the snap of a finger. You were just dicking around.
The invitation is open. Bring it, Ben.
Ben did try to bring it, and all you gave were excuses. I'm going to show you how fast Milo can make things happen when he wants them to. On February 1st, the riots happened at Berkeley that shut down Milo's event.
Open this with a Fox News alert. Massive protests and rioting have erupted at the University of California at Berkeley.
The very next day, Milo was on Tucker Carlson.
That was America last night. Breitbart editor Milo Yiannopoulos joins us for his first interview since we spoke with him by phone last night. Milo, thanks for joining us.
2 days after that, he was on Judge Jeanine.
Joining me now to talk about all this is the man himself, Milo Yiannopoulos. Good evening.
2 weeks after that, he was on Bill Maher.
He is the controversial senior editor of Breitbart News and author of the upcoming book Dangerous, Milo Yiannopoulos.
When Milo has an opportunity for national coverage, Tucker at the snap of a finger. Judge Jeanine at the snap of a finger. He was right on top of the Bill Maher interview when it was offered. Milo can make things happen if he really wants them to. When Ben accepted Milo's offer for a debate, Milo was too busy to check his email.
If you don't show up to debate, you lose.
Milo, you are the perfect example of someone who didn't show up to a debate, yet framed yourself as coming out ahead. Milo claims he's overtaking someone he used to look up to, that being Ben Shapiro. Since Milo loves to compare himself to Ben Shapiro, let's do some comparisons right now. Shapiro graduated from the University of California, Los Angeles, and Harvard Law School. Milo attended the University of Manchester, but left before graduating. Then he studied English literature for 2 years before he dropped out. Ben has written 7 books, the first of which was published in 2004. Wikipedia says Milo had published 2 poetry books under the name Milo Andreas Wagner. I originally thought it was just 1 book, but we'll give Milo 2 since he's already at a disadvantage being a college dropout. Ben Shapiro has 264 episodes of his show, The Ben Shapiro Show. Milo claims to have 29 episodes of his show. Ben is superior to Milo in almost every way except for popularity, which granted, Milo has an advantage at. It's probably one of the reasons Milo loves bragging about his numbers, because it's one of the few things he can point at and say, see, I'm better than Ben. But I'll remind Milo that a wise man once said,
there is a temptation to get hooked on the number of followers you have. It's not a particularly meaningful measure of anything, though.
Milo is a sort of person who can convince you how accomplished he is while accomplishing almost nothing.
I published a column, How to Beat Me. I wrote it down. I literally gave them an instruction book, but they're so fucking self-involved and stupid and lazy, they don't read it and they don't listen.
So let's go through this list. Don't act like a rabid animal. Do your homework. Stump me in the Q&A, not during my speech. Whichever side resorts to violence, intimidation, or aggression loses. Your university's reputation is in your hands. Remember that.
I literally, so confident am I, that they are the most intellectually lazy people on the planet. I wrote them a guide on how to beat me.
Milo gives a guide on how to beat him to people he knows can't win. People have so much faith in someone who spent the last year going around and schooling college students who don't have the experience or knowledge on how to handle someone like Milo. Only someone like Milo would go around picking on people he knows can't win, then preach to the world how unstoppable he is. Oh, look! I schooled a college student, a decade younger than me, with almost no debate experience. Look how impressive I am. To close out this video, I think something that Milo has said would best describe what happened to him.
But the day Nick Griffin appeared on Question Time, and the BBC was criticized mercilessly for giving this guy a platform. This is hate speech, this is bigotry, he's a racist, how dare you put this man on TV. The BNP...
Oh, that was a clever one.
What happened, of course, as anyone with any brains would be able to predict, was that the BNP evaporated. When British people saw what the guy who ran this party was really like, they stopped voting for that party. A couple of years later, the BNP is no longer a force in British politics. This is why it isn't just important to give platforms to ordinary speech, it's important to give platforms to all speech. Because sunlight is the best disinfectant.
What Milo is getting at is if you give a platform to the wrong people, these people will ultimately bring themselves down. It is sort of ironic that Milo, who went around the country lecturing about free speech, was ultimately brought down by his own words when he was given one of the largest platforms in this culture war. In closing, I'd like to quote Milo from an interview he gave to Vice in regards to a question. I think you can make two choices in life when you have difficult things ahead of you. The easy one with feelings, and the hard one with facts. Science tells us that people tend to make decisions based on their emotions rather than reason, and use reason to justify them later. It requires a significant degree of conscious effort to avoid that pitfall.